start with that whole concept of a family or multiple families banding together to effectively invest in the more inefficient markets of private companies for the potential of control, of some level of opportunity to impact, to better tax control, to not necessarily paying the fees of a fund format and all the benefits all that brings. Now, I'm going to argue, although it's getting tremendous press lately, this has been the case with families for many, many decades. What's different now?
I think really, I think it's a fair point, Angelo. In a lot of ways, it's the buzzword of the current, the current decade. But if you go back to the Rockefellers, and if you go back even further in Europe, probably in the 17 and 1800s, you did have large families, particularly at a time when the public markets were not very efficient. So the holding, the generating of wealth, and the maintenance of wealth through privately held businesses is something that basically occurred before the public markets grew, and it's something that has continued throughout this process. I think there's a little bit more press that's being given to it because of some more public folks, but while there might be a slight increase from a trend standpoint, this is something that entrepreneurial families have pretty much always done, and many have in their DNA.
And although I did hint at it in my open, why don't, from your perspective, you hint upon the reasons as to why? Why could this make sense for families to be more active as a direct investor in privates?
So I think there's a couple different reasons. I think, the primary reason is really around control, and the ability really to have a long-term time horizon where, they can really have almost an endowment style of investing where, they will sell if it makes sense, but otherwise they plan to basically hold it and to yield the benefits, often, a pretty strong yield play from an investment strategy. But, if you think, more broadly, I think there's other reasons, things such as the ability to add value and to have influence. I think many families, even though they may have day jobs in other sectors, to the extent that they enjoy a certain vertical and have relationships and know-how that they can add, a lot of them really appreciate the ability to contribute and feel like they're actively involved with the success of the company. And then, finally, I do think that there are some financial reasons why people would do it. First and foremost is a tax efficiency argument, which is, 95% of the participants, the limited partners in a traditional private equity fund, are non-taxable entities, basically endowments and pension funds. So the style of investment that you'll do and some of the tactics that you'll do will be a little bit different and more effective from a tax planning standpoint. And then finally, there is a little bit lower fees, or at least the potential for a little bit lower fees. But I would say that, the reality is that fee reduction is not going to be significant, because whether you're doing it yourself, you're hiring somebody else, there is a cost to doing that. So even if you did it yourself, you would need to think about the opportunity cost of, your time of doing the deal. And most of the time you're going to hire a team or different people to help you, who will need to be compensated in some structure similar to, the private equity model. The one thing I just will end with is while the total level of fees may be often similar, maybe a little bit less, I think what you definitely do see is the ability to have much more alignment. So, the traditional 2 and 20 structure, that 2%, particularly with the mega funds, is making, a lot of the general partners extremely wealthy. And, to the extent that you do have costs, if you're doing it internally, you're covering your actual costs. You're not really making a profit just from the deployment of capital.